So as we let this room kind of fill in a little bit, I want to say hi to everyone. I am Travis Keys. I'm the chairman of American Photographic Artists New York. I want to thank, obviously, our panel for being here. This is our first in the series with Hahnemühle, and I want to thank them for partnering up with us to do an amazing series that we're going to bring all kinds of new speakers and topics to you, and really excited to do that. Kevin Graham, why don't you introduce yourself and tell us a little about what you do?
I'm Kevin Graham. I'm the sales manager for the East Coast of the United States, and you can hear my fire alarm go off in the neighborhood. That's the charm of Zoom. That's the charm of Zoom. So I handle Hahnemühle for the eastern part of the United States. I've worked with Tony Morella for years. It's great to be a part of this. Travis, Debbie, thanks for inviting us.
And I obviously want to develop the Photograph newsletter, and that's Deborah Gilbert, who's with me, who does an amazing newsletter for the community, and also works with me very closely as my she helps me program a lot of stuff for APA and keeps me sound. She does a lot of stuff behind the scenes. Deborah, say hi, and thank you for kind of helping us put this series together. Why don't you tell a little about yourself?
Hey, well, not much to say. I'm a photographer and a recovering photo editor.
You're so much more than that.
And, well, event planner, and like I said, I love working with APA. It's a fantastic organization that everyone should join, photographers should join. Not necessarily bricklayers or other professions, but definitely photographers. And I love that we're doing this series with Hahnemühle because I'm very adamant about every photographer should print. It's so important. So many photographers don't print now, and you put so much time and talent and imagination into creating these photographs, and then they're trapped in your hard drive. They spend their whole lives trapped in your hard drive or on their phone. They deserve to be printed on beautiful paper and live out in the world. I agree. I know some people are afraid of printing, but we're here with this. This is the first in a series of webinars to demystify and hopefully inspire everyone to start printing.
Yeah, we're going to be hitting a lot of different products, and it's not just about the paper, but it is. But no, today it's about the paper. And being that way, I want to introduce Tony Morella, our very first in the series. Hello, how are you?
I'm fine. Thanks a lot, Travis.
Thanks so much for joining us. Where are you zooming from, as they say?
Oh, well, I'm in my home, so I'm safe. I'm in Montvale, New Jersey, so I'm right on the New York State border. I can walk down the block to New York from my house here, and I have a studio here as well, which has been a lot of fun. I do a lot of cool prints, and I'll tell you in a second when I do my PowerPoint.
I know there's going to be some PowerPoint stuff there, but I'm still going to ask you some questions. We may see it again in the PowerPoint, but how did you first kind of fall in love with printing, and was it through photography first? Where was the segue into it?
It was in my genes. My grandfather was a printer, a photographer printer in New York. During the Depression. And he had a studio where he printed industrial photos for companies in the area near Hell's Kitchen, where he grew up. Wow. So he started this, I want to say, this urge to photograph and print. My father had the bug for a while. I didn't even know about it until I was like 16 and found a box in our attic that I said, "What the heck is this, Dad?" And he goes, "It's a camera." And I'm looking at this black box that's like 8 inches or 10 inches by 10 inches by 4 inches. And I'm like, this isn't a camera. And he secretly presses a button on the side, and out pops so it was a Graflex for a 45 camera, which was I was like, oh my God, it is a camera. And that's how I got the bug. And so since I've been 16, I've been photographing, and I had my own dark rooms, and eventually I actually studied it. I have a degree in fine art from Montclair State University, and with a concentration in photography. And it's just stuck with me all these years. It's been a lot of fun. I love doing it. I think it's one of the greatest things in life is to be able to share your imagery, what's in your mind, and with other people sharing what's in their minds by showing their photographs and
Yeah.
printing them up and having this beautiful stuff. My house is filled with not only my photographs but other people's photographs. My wife actually photographs as well, and it's just adds a lot to our lives to have all of this art around us.
I'm so happy to. Is there a dog or something in the background growling? I hear something.
It may be. Hold on one second. Maybe my air conditioner.
It sounded like someone's stomach was really hungry, or so. Kevin, why don't you tell us a little bit how you got involved with the company you're working with and the paper just a bit while we come back to Tony.
I've been in the photo industry for a long time.
Yeah.
Got hooked up. So short version is I got academically dismissed from college. Terrible, right? So my grandmother grabs me by the ear and she says, "What are you gonna do?" So I got back in school and I found a part-time job at a photo retailer. That was it. I worked for photo retail for quite a few years, 17 years with Ilford. I've got a little framing experience behind my on my resume, and always a passionate paper guy. So right place, right time with Hahnemühle, going on 7 years with them. Terrific company, great product. And I'm a passionate photographer. I still shoot my Leica, not as much, but I'm an M6 kind of guy.
Yep.
I just wish I printed more. I wish I took more pictures, but I'm as big a photo weenie as there are. So.
And do you prefer getting into the darkroom or actually kind of going straight to the digial paper? Are you more?
No, I worked in the darkroom for a while, being an Ilford guy, so I printed for a while, and then I slowly moved over to digital. Confession here, I'm not taking as much as I want to, but it comes and goes. So
well, now I'm going to hand it over to Tony because I know we're here for a reason. We're here to talk about actually trying to match what you see on the screen to your paper, which seems like it'd be, you're like, oh, you should just be able to print it, but it's actually, something that's not so doesn't kind of click that way. Obviously, the paper doesn't have backlight and all this, so there's a whole rhyme and reason of how to rework your wonderful print so it looks amazing on paper. So I'll hand it over to you so you can take onto this. And what I want to tell everybody right now is we will be taking questions at the end, and there's a wonderful little Q&A box if you see in the lower section there. So please put your questions in there. I will be looking at them, and we'll be answering all kinds of questions at the end. Tony, it's all yours. Share away, please.
All right. So like Travis said, my name is Tony Morella. Presently, I run a studio called Digital Editions Atelier. And I'm thrilled to be sponsored by Hahnemühle and the APA for doing this. I've been printing for a long time. And to me, it's one of the most wonderful things in my life is to be able to do this. There's other things, but this is a lot of fun. Just a little bit about my background. I have been taking photographs since I was 16. I'm not a professional photographer. I was actually have a degree in fine art photography. So I've done a lot of different kinds of photography. I've also done a lot of different kinds of printing, alternative printing processes, lithographic printmaking. I've taken art history and photo history. It's been a passion of mine for a long time. After I graduated from college, I had a 30-year corporate life, being a technician, product manager for some of the largest companies that produce photographic materials. My end of it always was in the printing end of it. So it wasn't as Kodak, the photographic end, it was Kodak, the printing end of things. But it was a great career. I got to go all over the world. It was a lot of fun. I got to meet people. And mostly my job was to help people understand printing. Today, about 10 years ago, I decided I wanted to open my own studio, my own print shop, and I do that, and it's the best decision I've ever made. It is a lot of fun. I get images from all sorts of clients, everything, you know, from just a straight portrait photograph to really cool images that people have constructed in Photoshop and things like that. So it's beautiful. It's like having a gallery come to your house. Like every other week, I'll get portfolios from people asking me to, you know, please print out these images. So it is a great thing to do, and it's great. It's been a lot of fun. I enjoy it. So the first question I have to most of you is, have you any idea how many photos will be taken in 2020? And this to me was an interesting fact. I was thinking, you know, billions, but according to Key Point Intelligence, 1.4 trillion photos in 2020. That's a lot of images that are being, and it's mostly because cell phones have taken a big chunk of the photographs that are going on out there. But it means there's going to be 1.4 trillion photos out there for people to see. And the question really is, how will you differentiate your photos as part of that 1.4 trillion that are out there? And of course, my opinion is the easiest ways are with software, of course. You know, you can manipulate your images one way or another. And paper. I mean, printing it out on paper, there's a lot of cool things that you can do. I do it as a living, but there's no reason why anyone can't do this kind of adjustments to their photographs to really make them unique. So like this image here is just a picture of a cannon up in Ramapo, New York there. It's probably been photographed about 10 million times. It's right on a national historic site there, but I wanted it to look different. So I gave it a lot of different looks through Photoshop, but in addition to that, I printed it on some really beautiful paper that gave it a really nice texture. And I've got people who've looked at it and said, wow, where did you get this Civil War era photo? And it's like, well, I just made it. Quick 5 minutes on papers. Papers makes all the difference, and there's a lot of different papers that are out there. Paper, as we know it, as a means for producing images, has really been around since 150 BC, and it was animal skins. And I know most people will say, well, gee, they probably don't do that anymore. But the fact is, it lasts 1,000 years, and there are still documents, very important documents, that are printed on vellum to this day. Things like the Torah, Gutenberg's Bibles, most of them were printed on vellum. And the other location of where we think about where paper started, which is actually in 105 AD, was the first industrialized sort of paper making, is from Asia, rice paper, which is not, by the way, rice. It's a misnomer. It's actually a bush, an evergreen plant that's used. Today, the quality papers, the top quality papers, come from cotton rag. And I say today, but it's been around since 1056. 100% cotton rag is one of the highest standards today for archival paper. And alpha cellulose, which is high grade wood. It's not, you know, your average wood. They get the cream of the crop of wood that's acid and lignin free, and they make incredible paper out of it. Now, there is probably only, I want to say, about 5 companies in the world, maybe only 4 companies in the world that make these kinds of super high grade paper. Hahnemühle is one of them. I love theirs. That's why I use theirs almost exclusively. But there's a company in Japan, there's one in France, there's one in Italy, there's one in the US that make this standard of paper. And I'll explain why having a higher standard paper, it is to your benefit. There's a lot of other things that make paper as well. Agave, cotton, bamboo, hemp. There's paper that's made, companies are making paper, and these are generally looked at as green papers. I've had a lot of clients come to me and say, well, you know, I really don't want a forest to be cut down for my prints. Most of my clients are artists. And that's when I push them to one of these other green products. And they're green because they are a pulp that is almost like a weed. It grows so much. So these other things like bamboo and hemp have become a great alternative to people who want to remain more green when they are having their prints done.
Yeah,
So,
that's a great point on the papers. I mean, these plants, bamboo, agave, and hemp, don't use pesticides. They use less water than cotton. They have a bit of a story. They're renewable. So you're absolutely right. They resonate very, very well with that kind of a person. Or, as you know, the papers have a different feel to them at the same time. Yeah, it's a great point, Tony.
Yeah, no, they're out of the norm for what people really expect for papers, but they do a tremendous job. I mean, hemp has been around for a long time. The British Navy used hemp for hundreds of years on their ships and things.
And the Constitution, the Declaration of Independence, and the Constitution, the drafts were written on hemp paper. So it's got a bit of a history here in the U.S. So it's fascinating. Cool. Yeah. I
didn't know that. Oh, that's neat. Yeah. Okay, so just to let you know, digital inkjet printing has an enormous variety of papers today, which is really cool. My father and my grandfather printed photographically, and I'll never forget finding like a box of paper that had like this really strange look to it, and it was photographic paper. And my dad said, yeah, back in the day they used to make all of these interesting photos. They made like a vellum paper which was real paper, not vellum, but all these other kinds of papers that nobody was making anymore. You know, in the photographic world, it came down to glossy or luster, and that's it. But in the digital world, since the digital printing started, inkjet printing started, there's companies like Hahnemühle who come up with some of the most incredible papers again. And, you know, papers that haven't been seen in the printing world, in the photographic printing world for years. These are very high quality papers, fiber-based papers with Birata. By the way, if you're a lover of like Ansel Adams never printed on an RC type paper, a resin coated paper. His were all, and if you go to any of the exhibits of his stuff that travels around the country, you see that they're actually on fiber-based Birata paper, right? Because he wanted a quality of the paper that's going to last for a long time, and he wanted a whiteness that was produced that was very white, but wasn't produced using like chemicals. Birata is like a clay that goes on the top, and it produces a beautiful white coating to make your papers, make your images really jump. Drawing papers, watercolor, like I said, rice, bamboo, canvas, 100% cotton stuff are out there now for you guys to try. The newest stuff, of course, is metallic pearlescent or metallic silver. These are interesting things that you would think are brand new, but actually at the turn of the century, they were using things like brass and putting them into photographic papers and making them fluoresce like this. But they've come back again in the digital world, and they produce some beautiful, in fact, I just produced a half a dozen prints today for a client who wanted all of her stuff on a metallic pearlescent paper. Resin coating papers are out there if that's what you like. Personally, I think it looks too plasticky, but you know, they're out there. If you want them, you could get them exactly. There's a lot of photographic companies that are making resin coated papers that look exactly like the older resin coated papers that they were making in the photographic world. And there's a lot of other cool things that are out there. I personally printed on things like metal, real sheets of metal, which is a lot of fun. Fabrics, Jacquard is this company out on the West Coast that produces digital inkjet fabrics. A couple of companies are making plastics that'll go through, thin plastics. It's a whole world out there of really, really interesting things that you could print on. So a little bit about inkjet papers. They're not all the same, even if they have the same name. So for instance, a glossy from one manufacturer can be different than a glossy from another manufacturer. There's a lot of things that go into the making of the paper that produces these differences. There are 4 paper factors, I want to say, that affect your print. They're the whiteness, the coatings that go on there, the thickness, and the surface. And if you're aware of these differences, it'll help you tremendously in being able to print more successfully. And because being in this printing world as a digital printer for the past 10 years, I of course hear lots and lots of clients come to me and say, I tried printing this and I had no success. and it's sad because it's not all that hard. But you do have to make sure that you understand some of the factors. The first is how white it is. So everyone says, oh, my paper is white. Well, white comes in a lot of different colors. I don't know how well this shows up on your screen, but there's everything from a warm white to a cold white, and each one of them is produced by the paper manufacturer for different reasons. So a natural white is more of a warm white. A regular white is, I want to say, middle of the road. And then there's applications where somebody needs a white that is a bright white. Bright whites, of course, make a lot of things pop. It depends on the source, the pulp, the amount of bleaching, and the amount of additives that are in there. So the problem is that if you're printing, let's say you printed on one paper and you went to another manufacturer, you can't just pop it in and say, okay, it should print out like that other manufacturer's. You have to really understand and your system has to understand really more about that paper. And just to give you an idea, one of the biggest things about paper is where it's made. And clean water plays an enormous part in making paper that is good, that's going to last a long time, and it's going to be both archival and a whiter white, a really pure white. to them. So just to give you an idea, if you've ever been through New Jersey, you know where the Passaic River is. Marcal paper is on the Passaic River, and the best stuff that they make are bath tissue and bath towels, right? Paper towels. But if you want to see, let's say, where the U.S. currency is made, U.S. currency is made by Crane paper on the Housatonic River out in Massachusetts, because they have a much better, cleaner water source. And cleaner water sources are essential to really good paper manufacture. It's one of the reasons why I use the Hahnemühle paper, because they are on, call it alpine water.
It's a great point. I mean, we've been pulling the same spring water out since 1584. We use unfiltered water, which is just crazy if you think about it, since 1584. And to put some perspective on it, the local brewery in Einbeck has been pulling out the same spring water since the late 1300s. It's just unbelievable. The great point, Tony. It's about the water.
It is. A lot of it is about the water. And I worked for International Paper when I was part of Anatech, and you know, they had plants all over the place. And one of the biggest things that they would tell me as well is, yeah, you know, it's about the water to get a good paper. So contaminants in the water make poor paper strength, poor sizing, low brightness, blotchiness, poor adhesion. Now, all papers, all digital papers have some sort of coating on them. A poorly made paper base actually gets adhesion problems. And for me, that's a big, big deal, because many of the clients that I have, they want, I could go up to 44 inches by like 5 feet. If I make a print and it has poor adhesion and something pops off, you know, even a small, tiny little specks, you know, they don't want to buy it. And I can understand, and I have to reprint it for them. I do everything I can to keep those incidents from ever happening. So for me, good paper is an essential. Some papers use white enhancers. There's nothing wrong with having an optical brightening agent, but you just have to know that there are some drawbacks to it. They use UV light, which means that if you are standing under an incandescent light, you're going to not be as white. But if you're in like a room, if you take it into a room where there's a lot of UV light coming from the bulbs, like in a lot of galleries, you'll look whiter. And there's, you just have to understand that that's one of the reasons why, is because it's using that ultraviolet light to make it look brighter. So it's different. It'll look different under different lighting conditions. Some of them, they do decompose over time. I've heard stories of some of them becoming yellow, but it all depends on what OBAs they're used. There's actually a lot of different kinds that are out there. The coating affects the image. Coating technologies, most people have many layers of coating. You just don't realize it to do different effects, mostly to get the paper to accept the ink. Gloss and luster are produced by an extra coating over the top of them. Microporous is the best kind of paper coating for inkjet papers. And if you look at the diagram here, it actually keeps those dots from spreading. And if you look at a micrograph, you can see the differences. Like a plain inkjet paper, the ink just, you know, runs all over. Cast coated paper does a pretty good job of containing that. Microporous does a tremendous job. So if you're looking for photographs that have very precise ink placement, high detail and things like that, you want to go with a microporous paper. How heavy your paper is, it's usually in grams. The thicker the paper, the longer it lasts. So if archivability is, you know, top on your list for what kind of paper that you want to have, the best papers are much thicker. And it's mostly because a lot of the oxidation, you got to remember, if you have a print that's in a frame, the glass is protecting it from the atmosphere on the one side, but there really isn't a lot on the other side that's protecting it. So the thicker it is, the longer it takes the oxidation to actually attack the image that's on the front there. But that's not to say that that's the only way to do it. If you've got a good framer, they'll seal up the back as well for you. So just something to understand. I say most of my clients want the Beretta fiber-based stuff, which is about 350 GSM, and it looks a lot like the photographic products, the true photographic products that were before like resin coating started. I have a number of clients that use rice paper. They just love that thinness. They love the look that they get from that, and it's a beautiful look. What your paper feels like, all paper starts out as a blob of pulp. It's dried and calendared. It's run through a series of pressurized rollers. There's rough, there's cold press, there's hot press. Rough is just cold rollers. Cold press is cold rollers with some low pressure. And hot press is heated, so you get a really smooth surface to that paper. And then on top of that, you can have coatings that could make it either a luster or glossy, depending on what you want, or nothing at all. There's even textures that can be printed or embossed on a lot of them to make them look like linen and silks and that kind of stuff. So when you're choosing your paper, you should look at a number of key specs. Now here's just one of the specs. It's weight. 315 GSMs is a good thickness for it. How white it really is, there's an ISO standard for that, whether it has acid or is acid-free, whether it has OBAs, brightening agents into it. All these things are part of the specs that manufacturers, good manufacturers, produce and let you see, so that you can make a educated decision on what kind of paper you really want to be printing on. 100% cotton paper is going to last. It actually keeps the standard of what Bibles and Torahs were printed on. So it's actually a super high standard for paper that lasts a real long time.
And all those standards and specs are on our website, so it's not a problem at all. You can download the PDF.
Yes, and you should, you know, when you're choosing a paper, you should decide what do you want that paper to be like, and what are the purpose of this. If you're selling something that's going to go through a gallery or something like that, you don't want that image or that print to come back at you, you know, 5 years down the line with somebody saying, well, wait, you know, it deteriorated, you know, what went wrong here, kind of thing. So it's good to know what the specs are for the paper that you're going to be printing on. So the next part, of course, is monitors. All right. So in this digital world, we tend to think that what we see is what we get when we're, and this is the biggest issue that most people who are printing for themselves come across. I hear it about 1 billion times. I saw it on my screen. It looked great. But when I went to print it, it looked either dark or different, or the colors are different. you know, how come, why is this? And I'll give you a little insight to the WYSIWYG, which was a term back in the 1980s that we used to use that meant what you see is what you get. And literally back in the 1980s, it was true. Because you only had an 8-bit color scanners, you had sRGB monitors, and you had only 4-color printers. So pretty much everything was a low standard, but you know, you saw from your monitor what you were going to get. Today, it's a whole nother world, all right? First of all, cameras are able to get Adobe RGB, which is a much larger color space, or Adobe Wide RGB, which is even larger. And a number of photographers are using Pro Photo, which is a huge amount of color that you can capture in your images. At the same time, printers have gone from 4 colors, 6 color, 8 colors. My printers are 11 colors, so I can print an enormous range of colors. The problem is most people are using sRGB monitors, and an sRGB monitor literally cannot show you A, what you can capture, and B, what you can print. So if you can't see it on your monitor, but it prints, it's going to be a surprise for you. Monitors have 3 main features: bit depth, which is the color depth, color gamut, which is the color breadth, the number of colors, and the resolution, which is pixels per inch. Bit depth is the color depth. So it's monitors, cameras, all software work in bit depth, all right? And they all have limitations. And it's important for all the types of images where your color is critical to you. It's essential for good portrait photographers having good bit depth. Cameras actually capture energy, and it's the software that turns them into bits. RAW files are all the color data that the camera captures before being processed. JPEGs are RAW files compressed to 8 bits. So if you're shooting in JPEGs, you're actually throwing away a lot of the color that you've captured from your RAW files. TIFFs are RAW files that have been processed to 16 bits. So the more bit depths, the more variety in colors that you're going to be able to capture. Monitors come in 6, 8, and 10 bit, but they actually can be tweaked to simulate more bits. Pixels are measured in bits. So a camera sensor, which records the light, if you turn it into a JPEG or if you photograph it as a JPEG, it's literally the software that's going in and mathematically dividing up the energy that you captured, the color energy, into 8 different levels, all right? If you convert to a TIFF, you're actually converting it into 16. And this plays an enormous part in when you're adjusting your photos. So let's say you have a TIFF, you have 16 different levels that you can play with of every single color. But if you have a monitor that can't show you all those 16 bits, you'll never see what adjustments you're actually making unless you make a dramatic adjustment. So the 3 colors together are what is a pixel. And here's the comparison. Here's an image, exact same image. It was processed as a JPEG in the camera. And then this one started out as a RAW file. It was exposed, both of them exposed the same. This one was processed as a TIFF, and as you can see, there is a huge amount of information that's lost in the JPEG, but still there when you do a TIFF. I hope that looks okay on you. Understanding color gamut. Color gamut and color depth are not the same thing. Color depth is those 16 or 8 different levels of a color. Color gamut is the wide, the number of different colors that you can have. So colors that you can see, the camera sees, the monitor shows, the printers can print, are all part of the color gamut. And devices use different color gamuts. Color space is color gamut of a device. So back in like 1931, we actually, the CIE was actually able to publish a chart which shows all the different colors that a person, an average human being can see. Now, in 77, they produced a 3D model of the exact same thing. So the model on the right shows you exactly what colors the average human being can actually see. So it becomes like the standard of, all right, how much color should I capture? Can I capture? What's out there? So this is, if you look at the one on the left, it's just a cross section of the one on the right. And you navigate this map with LAB, and I'm sure that many of you have used LAB coordinates in your software. It's actually a very simple system. L is the lightness, so it's up and down, whether it's white or black. A and B are, A is the green magenta, and B is the yellow blue. So with these 3 numbers, you can actually locate any particular color that you can see. So for instance, 50L, 60A, and -10B relates to exactly the same color of what the human eye can see. Human eye, sRGB, which is what most monitors are in this space here. And as you can see in this triangle, it's not an enormous amount of colors. It may appear to be a lot when it's all by itself, but you're actually cutting out a lot of what you saw in your scene when you photographed it. If you go to a chromogenic print, you're able to pick up what you've recorded in an sRGB monitor, because they're mostly 4-color printers. If you're shooting in an Adobe RGB, you're actually capturing a lot more color. You're culling way more colors in the green and the blues areas there. If you have an 8-color printer, you can actually print most of those colors that you captured. If you're shooting ProPhoto RGB, you're capturing even more than what most humans can see. You need something like the Ultrachrome K3 or an 11-color printer in order to get even the most out of what you've actually captured with ProPhoto. And even that is not 100%, but it's closer than anything else. So color space subsets, human eye. If you're doing ProPhoto, you're going to have to, if you want to see what you captured, you're going to need at least an 11-color printer. If you're shooting RGB, you need at least an 8-color printer to print that. If you're shooting sRGB, a chromogenic printer, which is a 4-color printer, will do you fine. The printers, as you saw in the thing, they're not exact, but they're close subsets. And the third thing you have to understand about your monitors is understanding the resolution. Resolution is the number of horizontal and vertical pictures a device has. They're expressed in different ways. Monitors call them, cameras call them pixels per inch. Scanners call them samples per inch. Printers call them dots per inch, right? But they're all pretty much the exact same thing. And here's how your monitor is working, right? So like I said, most monitors operate in an sRGB color space. They're not showing all the color space that you captured. If it's a 6-bit monitor, it's not showing you anywhere near the color depth you already captured. And the resolution is nowhere near what you can print. It's most of the time, monitors have about a 93 pixels per inch versus what a good printer can print, which is 360 dots per inch. So which monitors show what? Well, there's a great, if you look on the thing there, and I guess we can produce this, the digital cameras.net best monitors shows, it actually takes all the monitors that are out there and grades them for what's the best and what's the worst. This list actually goes on forever. There's price above 1,000, there's price above 500, there's price above, but if you look carefully at it, you see that it's got, the best have really good resolution, all right? They've got good bit depth, and this one here is a 12-bit lookup, all right? And they got good color gamut. So your monitor, really good monitor, shows you, in this case, 99.5% of Adobe RGB, which as standards go, that's really high, all right? So if you're shooting in Adobe RGB, you really want a monitor that's going to show you as much of that, of what you're shooting as possible. Those of you who've gone out and bought the Apple Retinas are a great, I'm a PC guy actually myself, but I love looking at the Apple Retinas. For one thing, they're one of the few monitors out there that have like 217 pixels per inch. Not quite as much as what you can print, but a lot closer than most monitors. And they have a good color space that's not quite, it's called P3. It's not quite Adobe RGB, but it's much larger than sRGB. So you can see a lot more, and you can see a lot more of the resolution of the images that you have. TVs, the good news is that TVs are showing more color, which is a good thing, because as they become more prevalent out there in the market, the cost of a good monitor that can show you 99 or 100% of Adobe RGB is coming down. So that's a good trend. You know, up till now it's been really difficult and very costly to buy a good monitor. But like I said, some of the best monitors are like around $1,000 there, but they're actually coming down because of the competition being produced by television companies that are making really, really high HDR type images, things. Okay, so I know that all of you have, or at least most of you have gone into your local store that sells, this is actually a picture from Target, right? And you see all these monitors and they got the exact same image on them, all right? It's usually one canned image. This one had text, but it could be anything. And if you look at all the monitors, they all look different. And you say to yourself, well, why do they all look different? It's the same image on all of them. Why are some the blues lighter, darker, different blues, some more red blues, some more green blues. They're not calibrated. That is probably one of the biggest challenges that most people aren't told, is that there are no standards that monitor producers and television producers need to adhere to when they put a monitor on the market. There's nothing that says your monitor has to be at this calibration, and people aren't aware. I've had lots of people tell me, oh yeah, it's a brand new monitor, it should be calibrated. It's not. Manufacturers of all of this equipment, they have their own reasons. They may think that their clients like something that's brighter. They may think that their clients like things that are more on the green side or more on the red side, hotter, colder, right? So they produce them as they wish. It doesn't mean that they can't be brought into calibration. It just means that they are under no obligation to match anybody else's monitor out there, so they are uncalibrated. And an uncalibrated monitor is literally miscommunicating the color information. So if you look at this photo here, your file may look like the top one here, which looks pretty good. At least on my monitor, it looks pretty good, all right? But your monitor, since it's not calibrated, may be showing you this image here. And you'll look at this bottom image and on your screen and say, oh, I got to adjust for it. So you'll adjust for that greenness, and then when it actually goes to print, it'll come out looking too green, and you'll be like, well, gee, why did I overdo it? But the reality is your monitor has been lying to you about what your file is. You got to remember, the file goes from the computer to the printer, not from the computer to the monitor, then to the printer. So what you're looking at on your monitor could be very different from what you're actually sending over to your printer. So what you want to do is you want to calibrate your monitor so at least it's closer to what your printer is going to see. There's two kinds of calibration systems. They're made by a number of different companies. The least expensive one is the monitor calibration, which calibrates your monitor, which is a good thing to have. That's like bare necessities. If you want to be a printer like me, if you want to print really good prints, you should actually go for the more expensive one, which actually creates an ICC profile, and I'll talk about that in a minute, that allows your printer to match your monitor better. So step one, if you're like sending out your prints to anywhere to have them, you should have your display calibrated, and that's like a $149 purchase. But if you're going to be doing your own printing, you should be getting a device that calibrates the prints as well as your monitor and matches the two of them up. And it's really easy to do. You just load the software, hang the device, hit next. It flashes a whole bunch of colors. It creates a standard profile for your monitor. You save that profile and you use it when you're looking at your images. You should also, when you're evaluating your colors, you should be in a darkened room. Like I have a hood on my monitor. I do everything I can to keep stray light from hitting the monitor and giving me an incorrect look when I'm looking at images. Good printing requires an ICC profile. Most inkjet paper manufacturers provide them for each paper. You really need to download them. They are free, which is great. The paper manufacturers make them so that you can get closer to what your print and your monitor look like. And they are ideal for doing soft proofing, which we'll get into in a moment. They're very specific to not only the paper, but the equipment that they're using. So in this case here, one of my printers is a 9890. I downloaded the, it's an Epson 99. I downloaded from Hahnemühle the ICC profiles that are for that particular printer. So what's an ICC profile? It's a free bit of software is what it is. It describes your paper to your monitor and to your printer. And that's a big step in getting what you see to be what you print. All right, so if you're not printing with an ICC profiles, you're sort of shooting in the wind when it comes to sending your files over to the printer, because what you see and what the printer sees could be totally two different things, all right? When you buy a printer, lots of times the manufacturer gives you a whole bunch of them, but you're not stuck with just those. You can easily go to the website for the paper manufacturer and download the ones that it's actually quite simple, the ones for your paper that you want to use. And here's how it works. You install it into your computer, all right? Once you have it, it provides the monitor with information that allows it to adjust your view. So for instance, in this case, I was using German Etch, which is a warmer tone paper. It actually goes in there and adjusts the view when I put it in soft proofing so that what I'm seeing is closer to what the effects of the paper and the printer will be. And it comes up with a closer match. Soft proofing is an essential to getting good prints. In Photoshop, this is an old version. It's really pretty easy. You just go to Proof Setup, Custom. It allows you to find the different ICC profiles from a list. You click on the one that you're going to be using. You put on whatever rendering intent you want, and you click on the different simulate the paper, simulate black ink, and basically you're ending up with a situation like this. So here's a pre-proofed image. Hopefully this looks okay over the internet. When I proofed it, it looked like this. And then I went in with the proofed image and adjusted it to get back some of those colors that were lost. So you should always be using ICC profiles so that you can see what effect both the ink and the paper are going to have on whatever thing you're trying to print. There is such a thing as out of gamut colors. Out of gamut colors are colors that maybe you can print. So in this case here, the sRGB monitor is the white. It can only show you so many colors. The printers, in this case, was a 6-color printer. It could actually print. Now, what ends up happening is it prints those colors that it can print, even though you couldn't see them on the monitor. So it will print, but the monitor won't be able to show them to you. The other good thing about soft proofing is gamut warnings. So there are colors that your printer can't print. It's some of the colors that basically even an 11-color printer just can't, but you captured them, which let's say you were doing pro photo, you captured those colors, which is really cool, but there's no way in the world that there's a printer out there that can actually produce them. So you want to find out what those colors are and adjust them, since they will not print. So Gamut Warning is something that you put on. It's once you've got your ICC profile loaded, it'll show you Gamut what things. I use like this really limey green to show me what colors definitely will not print. And this saves you like a ton of money in just printing and seeing, oh, gee, that's not what I thought it was going to be. All right. With a Gamut Warning, you'll see what you'll never be able to print because of the system that the restrictions of the printing system that you have. So the good thing is you can adjust those colors. I just use the hue and saturation, all right, which is an adjustment in Photoshop, and I'll go in there, and 9 out of 10 times it's just the saturation, that the color that's out of Gamut is slightly so saturated that my printer can't actually reproduce it. So I'll just tweak down the saturation just a little bit, and voila, you'll see all those light greens go away, and I know what I'm looking at is what I'm able to print. And you can actually sample it to see exactly what it is that I'm not printing. Another thing that everyone should be aware of is that digital devices are linear. We as human beings, we're not. Right? So what we see and what your camera sees are a little bit different. So what you want to do, this is what I advise to most of my clients, is I want to delinearize my images, and that's basically done with a characteristic curve. It's like this one here. You go in there while you're in your soft proofing mode. You can go in there, you can adjust it, adjust the curve so that you get something that is more like what a human sees as opposed to what a camera sees. There we go. And now sharpening. Now, sharpening is a difficult thing for when you're doing your printing, because there's not a really good way, since the monitors, even good monitors, don't have the same resolution as what you're printing. It's sort of, well, how do I know I've sharpened it precisely? So I use the Nik plugin, all right? And what it does is it doesn't show me the exact sharpening. It does actually in the loop there what it's going to do. But more importantly, it goes in there and it allows me to choose what I'm going to do with this image. Am I going to just display it on a monitor? Am I going to print it? If I'm going to print it, is it going to be inkjet? Is it going to be continuous tone? Is it half tone? All these different options. Of course, I pick inkjet, and it knows that, all right, if he picks inkjet, I've got this kind of sharpening that should be done. And then it even gives you another level in that. So I picked, it tells me, I could tell it what is the resolution of my printer. I could tell it actually even the viewing distance. So if, for instance, something's going to be on a billboard, 500 feet away from anyone, it doesn't have to be the same resolution as something that's going to be in a gallery. And here you can actually pick the type of paper, which is a big help, because there's a lot of different papers that are out there, but at least you can get closer to the kind of paper that you're going to be printing on. So if you print on glossy or luster or matte, you can actually pick even canvas, which is pretty cool, textured fine art papers. You can choose this is the kind of paper so that it knows what kind of sharpening to do. Once you've done that, you're all set to hit the print dialog. You have to set your printer. You have to set how it's handled, the colors are handled. And here's where a lot of people just hit the auto, yeah, let my printer do it. I never do that. I use the ICC profiles, and I say, I'm going to be the one. I want this to be exactly printed, the colors to be handled exactly as this paper demands. So I'll pick up the profile, the ICC profile again, and use it here. You have to choose your rendering and your black compensation. You can actually, in the setup, save if you do the same stuff over and over again, you can actually save that so you don't have to redo it each time. Rendering intent, I get a lot of questions about rendering intent. There's 4 intents that are out there. 2 of them actually have nothing to do with photography. They're not for photographers. One's used for graphic designers, and the other one is used for business people. Saturated is really used for business people. Nothing that says you can't choose those, but it's not going to really help you. Relative and perceptive are the 2 intents that you really use for printing photographs. And it's a very, very difficult concept. But basically what it's saying is there are colors that I'm not going to be able, that are going to drop out. So you're telling the printer, here's what I want you to do with those colors that are dropping out. So you see in this graph here, the far ends are colors that are going to drop out. In relative, it keeps all of the remaining colors exactly the way they are and prints. So it drops out the ones that it can't print, but it uses the relative colors for the print. It's good for colors that you want to be truer to exactly what you had seen when you took your photo. Perceptual does a little bit different. It also, the things that you're going to drop no matter what. But it actually goes in there and it adjusts the tonal scale. So it adjusts the ones that are going to print. It separates them out a little bit more so that it looks tonally more natural. Relative can make it look a little bit unnatural. When you do perceptual, it's actually changing those colors a little bit. So if you're a purist and you want the colors to be exactly or as close to exactly what you had photographed, you would use a relative. If you're really more interested in seeing the images look perceptually better, you would choose perceptual. In the print settings, this is the media type. It's not the actual media that you're choosing there. So all the medias fall into different categories. Color, black and white. Quality level, I use the highest. All right, no adjustment. You got to be very careful if you're adjusting or sending in the colors. You're letting your software do it, like I showed you before. You don't want the printer doing it as well, because then you get like 2 different entities trying to adjust the color. So in this case, they have a no color adjustment for the printer, which means you're doing it already in the software that you sent over. This is just the put up. I always preview it to give me one shot before I hit the print button. You can save these as well in case you do them all the time. Back to Photoshop and then hit print, and you're good to go. Just wanted to add another thing. There's a lot of cool vintage revival that can help make your images look like a lot of the I want to say, vintage aesthetics. Adobe in Photoshop and does it on one, Snapseed, Nik. All of them have this ability to have pre-programmed settings that you can just choose to get some really interesting looks to them. I love using the Photoshop. It has a gradient map, which is this icon over here, which brings up this, and you can pick up some beautiful things. Like cyanotypes is a vintage look. I get a lot of people that say, yeah, can you make it look like an old cyanotype? Easily, it takes me like 5 seconds. There's mixes of cyanotype and sepias. There's platinum. Platinum is a really big, I've done a number of platinum prints on the Beretta that people have thought, gee, you're a platinum printer. I said, no, I'm just a printer. Because platinum is a beautiful look. Silver Effects has some really cool looks that are in there. You can make some beautiful black and whites. This is what I did for the photo of the Canon. It's platinum and grunge, actually, to make it look kind of neat. Borders, all that kind of stuff is already in there. On One does some really cool stuff, like sepias and gum bichromate looks. I also sometimes combine the two of them, and then I'll erase parts and let like the original photograph, and this one case here, the original green of the leaves comes through because it's actually on 2 different layers. Just some tips. Inks are mostly water, therefore they need to gas out. So you should always let them dry for 24 hours. Don't touch the surface, use gloves. Hahnemühle has some great gloves. Maintain a good relative humidity when you're printing. Since it's mostly water, as you change the humidity in a room, you're changing how much ink is actually going to go down. I always keep my printers covered. Dust is the #1 enemy to printing, so keep them covered when you're not using. Print often because the less you print, the more time your inks have to start to dry up. So if you can, some printers actually let you remove the heads, which is great. So if you're going on vacation, you can actually take them out and put them in a cleaning solution, but run as often as possible. That's pretty much it for me. If there's, I don't know, are there any questions that have come up?
Yeah, there are definitely a couple of questions. I know someone wanted you to talk about images printed in magazines. The person was saying their print lab says no matter their DPI and bits, it's always 8-bit. Is that correct?
Good question. Hold on 1 second. I'll be right back in a second.
So Kevin, while he's off and running, obviously the paper has such a different quality to it, and in terms of using RCs versus rag versus something like that, what are some of the differences in terms of just the look and the way that the ink has that effect of looking on a paper?
Yeah, so if you look at the kind of, as Tony talked about, if you look at RC products, which are essentially plastic products, resin coated products that we used in the darkroom, type C prints, they're going to look cheesy, I guess, at best, and maybe that's not the best word for them, but they look very consistent in terms of the flakiness and you rattle them and things like that. When you start moving into fine art prints, you look at 100% cotton or a cotton blend or alpha cellulose products or wood products, and there's a different looks and feel to them. When people say to me, well, I'm looking for the most archival paper, and they always tend to go really far in, then you want cotton. I mean, that's it. You want cotton, and don't settle for anything less than that. Tony talks about optical brighteners. Optical brighteners are really kind of no different than if you shoot a faster film or a higher ISO, you're going to get grainier prints. Life is a series of trade-offs, and if you want whiter paper, you're going to have to suffer, for lack of better words, optical brighteners. Now, that's not going to...
Question on an optical brightener, does that actually bring down the length of archivalness, or because it has chemicals or bleaches it all, or does not change it at all?
It does not change the archivability or the longevity of the print. It will change the base tint over time. And that is to say that it will go back to its natural state. Look, we make PhotoRag bright white. Well, it's got optical brighteners in it. But if you're looking for something that is brighter base, you're doing infrared, you want something with a snappy contrast, then try it. Depending on where you store it, how it's presented, is it in your kitchen, is it next to an elevator shaft, there's lots of variances that are going to affect the longevity of those optical brighteners in it.
Are there pros and cons to papers with brighteners at all?
No, I mean, that's the trade-off in life. I mean, no, I mean, archivability, longevity, not going to be affected. Base tint over time, but that time, Travis, is going to be a moving target depending on where you spend it. And people always say, I don't want optical brighteners in my paper. Okay, don't get a paper with optical brighteners. Just
well, there you go.
Organize over
The
it.
debate has been answered. Tony,
Yeah,
Organize over it.
that's. Let me chime in a little bit here on that one. That's a good point. Definitely, there. First of all, there's more than one optical brightener, so you want to go with a company that actually uses a very good one and knows how to use it without putting too much of it on. And that you just learn, like over time using different samples. But on top of that, yes, there's some the background of the image, and like I said, it uses UV light to make that brightness. And the trade-off is that under different light conditions, it's going to look brighter or not as bright. It's just something that you have to understand. For most people, they don't even notice it. It really depends on when you bought it or when you made it. If you made it in a room with incandescent lights and you're showing it in incandescent lights, it'll look exactly the same the entire time. It's only when you bring that image into an area that has ultraviolet lights that it fluoresces.
In terms of papers, I know we had talked about RC versus all the wonderful other papers, from cotton to bamboo to all these textured wonderful things. RC, would that be more of a kind of resilient thing that you would want to kind of give to like family members and stuff like that? That's going to be touched. That's going to be kind of stand up a little more test of time than a paper that maybe you would have to use gloves on. Is it something that you recommend that?
No, I don't. Oh, I'm sorry. Do you want to grab that one?
Either one.
I would just say, RC papers are for everyday printing. We have RC papers in our lineup in our photo collection. It's for everyday printing. You want to turn your images into artwork, you print on the fine art product. So you have to kind of decide the path that you're going down.
It's really an aesthetic type of thing. RC papers have been around since World War II, actually. That's when they were invented. They were invented for the Army so that they can get quick prints out very efficiently. But it's become the standard in the photographic world since World War II. And if you're touching prints, if you're going to be handing pictures over to somebody else, a luster finish on it will not show the fingerprints as much.
Gotcha.
Right? So it's a good application. That's a good application for that. But it doesn't actually change. All of them have coatings on the top of them that keep them from just falling apart. So it doesn't really help in that respect.
Gotcha.
The ink will stay on no matter what as soon as it dries.
So jumping back to that one question, could you talk about images printed for magazines that the lab was talking about? No matter what the DPI and bits, it always shows as 8-bit. Is that correct?
The issue is when you're printing in a magazine, you're printing on a 4-color press. All right. So you have to, and a lot of press people will tell you, just send me a JPEG with an 8-bit file, mostly because they know they'll never be able to print that variation of either color gamut. They can't get the same gamut as an inkjet printer can get, and they can't get the bit depth, the differences in the colors. So what they're trying to do is they're trying to say, send me something that will look close to right what I can print, all right, so that you aren't surprised. So yes, definitely when you're sending things over, most of them, and you think, well, why don't they use inkjet printers? There are some commercially available inkjet printers, but the biggest problem is they're not fast enough. Inkjet printing is a slow process compared to a press, which runs like thousands of feet. Newspapers run like millions of feet an hour that are just zipping through these things. They don't have the ability to scale down and say, okay, yeah, I've got a press that. There are some presses out there that have what they call hexachromes, which have extra cylinders in them for doing better quality. So like you look at things, National Geographic prints on a hexachrome press. All right, so they've got a couple of extra colors on their presses, so they come up with a much. They'd probably be the ones who would say, yeah, you could send me a 16-bit, I could probably print it.
So not to dive too long into this, I have a question for you, and we can kind of, it's a big topic, but someone that's really kind of in the art world and fine art, it's very difficult to say I want to buy a printer, a professional printer, which printer is good. Should I have the cost and upkeep of a printer, the inks running the printer heads so they don't dry out? Is it more cost effective to have a relationship with a print place like yours and to kind of go in and build a relationship, or are there ways that people can actually print at home and find a printer that's cost effective and still get good quality out of it?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm an Epson guy, but I can print. I get a lot of stuff to print, and I keep my printer going every single day, right? And it's kind of essential to keep something going. But if I were a home hobbyist buying a printer, I'd probably go with the Canon units. The Canon units are a little less resolution. I could do 360, they do 300 around there, but they're still barely noticeable, the difference.
And it's a different way they deliver the ink to the paper, right?
Well, no, they pretty much deliver the ink the same way, but their heads are not being as high resolution. They don't clog as readily. So if I were buying, let's say, a home printer for my house, I would definitely go with a Canon for two reasons. One is that reason, the slightly less resolution is made up by the fact that they don't dry out as fast. The other is they're actually serviceable, self-serviceable. So you could take the heads out of those, put them in a cleaning solution, whether you're going on vacation or things like that, and put them back in all by yourself. Even if the head eventually goes, because they all go after a while, it's a lot of pressure being pushed on those heads, streaming the ink through. You can actually change the head out yourself. Now, the difference is a new head for a Canon is a few $100s. For me to get a new head, I have to have a service guy come in. We're talking $1,500 to $2,000 to have a head changed over.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a very big difference. So I tell people, if you're going to be doing your printing at home, they go, oh, I want an Epson because it's a really great printer. It is a really great printer, but you got to keep it fed. You got to, send through, even if it's just a test, file every single day to make sure that those heads are continuously flowing ink through them.
Yeah. So I have a question from Monica, and she's basically saying, hi, I actually take my Mac from time to time to the print lab to make sure that we're in the same color space after calibration. We look at both monitors and compare and compromise if needed. But she's basically asking, can you talk about 32-bit monster files in regards of color?
Can I talk about, I'm sorry.
She's talking about now sending the files to them and not going to them. And she wants to know in big files, I guess she's asking about color. Is there a difference in 30-bit monster files in regards of color? So I don't know if that.
Oh, no, actually, once you've created your image, this is an interesting thing. Once you've locked in what your colors are, all right, printers only print, literally, digital printers only print 2-bit, all right? It's either a drop of ink or no ink, all right? That's it, all right? But once you've taken that file and created either an 8-bit or a not so large, because I can understand exactly what she's saying. You know, if you got a 16-bit TIFF that's 40 by whatever, you're talking almost a gigabyte of file there. You can literally take that file, make it a JPEG, and it's not going to affect the colors because you've actually locked in the colors that you want. It'll actually take, it's not going to throw anything away, all right? It's only when you shoot JPEG at the beginning, you're not using up, you're throwing away colors, all right? And when you're working on your files, you want to be in 16-bit because you want to tweak those files to the exact color that you want. And it's hard because most monitors can't show you this, but you know, you want to be able to get just the right color. And to do that, you need 16-bit. But once you've got that 16-bit, you can flatten it and turn it into a JPEG and shoot it off. That'll save a ton of space, but you just can't modify it. You literally can't even change the size of it, all right? Because a JPEG, if you resize a JPEG, it's going to pixelate. So you have to, when you send it to them, you have to send them the file at the size that you want them to print. But as an 8-bit, it's going to be a lot smaller than a 16-bit.
I'm going to add to this question, but the question is, how do you get the richest, deepest colors? I.e., how much is in controlling your printer versus the digital file? And to add to that, we talked about many different color spaces where you have ProRes, you have Adobe RGB and sRGB. If we can't see the colors, why should we worry about them, or what what files should we be working with? Because a lot of people are like, well, why should I shoot in in Adobe RGB if I don't have a monitor, or if I don't have? But there are benefits and stuff like. Can you go into that a little bit?
Yeah, I'm definitely all about capturing as much color as I possibly can and reproducing that. So even the Canon printers, they're 11 color printers. So you can capture and you can print a great deal of color. If you have an inexpensive monitor, you can't see all of that color, but you can see what's going to be out of Gamut, and you could be pretty close. And yeah, if your monitor can't show you all of the Adobe space, you're going to be a little bit in the blind, but a Gamut warning will tell you whether that printer is going to screw up your colors or not screw up your colors. So yeah, I mean, if let's say I was a sports photographer, I'm sure a lot of people in your group shoot photography, they're not shooting ProPhoto. They're shooting JPEGs, and they're smart to do that because they need that space, they need that speed, right? They need to recycle as fast as possible to get their shots, and nobody is in there. They're printing if they're printing in magazines, and the magazine can't handle the extra color anyway. And nobody's out there saying, gee, the Jets jersey looks a little too lime green, so you have to know, what you're going to do. Lots of people just put their images, you know, I'm not a big fan of everything on the monitor, but if that's what you do, you know, there's no need to shoot with all of that. But if you're a fine art photographer, or if you're somebody who really wants to get a truer vision of what you saw when you took that photo, you really have to have a good monitor. It has to be a calibrated monitor, and you need a printer that can print all of those colors.
I know
The difference is you put one of my prints next to somebody else who only has like a 4-color printer. You'll see the difference. It's amazing how much color that is really in that photo that gets thrown away.
I know we really didn't talk about it, but in terms of once you have it printed and you let it dry for 24 hours, what's the best way, if they're not framed, to store them? To
store them, I always interleaf them. There's you can get it's a plastic. It's like a foam plastic, but they use it for like when they're shipping China. Right, and it does a beautiful job of keeping everything from harming your image. You know, people constantly handle photos way too much. Most of the prints that I make have at least a 1-inch to 2-inch border of white around them. So if they are going to hold it, you know, they don't hold it on the image area where it's going to. We have oils in our skins. All right, it's part of being human. It's actually a good part, but you don't want those oils to get on the papers. So I always handle my prints with gloves on. Your framer probably does the exact same thing. You take it to a framer, you know, they're smart enough to know that, you know, hey, if I put my fingerprints on this, it could show up eventually. And so you want to handle things in a more of like a museum-like way, so that they'll last a lot longer and they won't get ruined. But yeah, I mean, you should keep it in a relative humidity as well, because you know you don't want the paper to dry out, and you don't want it to get swell as well in too much humidity.
And I have to ask, do you have a go-to personal favorite paper that you use?
Oh, I use like tons of different papers. I'm kind of unique in that way, is that I stock about 25, 26 different paper for my clients, all right? Because each one of them wants a different kind of look. So I've got everything from metallics, and it really depends on what the image is. So I'll have a client say, well, what's the best paper for this? And I'll say, well, looking at that photo, it's got a lot of, you know, this in it. It'll look really cool on a metallic. It'll jump, you know, or they may say, they may send me something that looks more like a watercolor. And I'll tell them, hey, there's inkjet watercolor papers and they're beautiful. You know, this will enhance your image. So I actually ask my clients, what do you want to see? What do you want to show when you're showing these photos? What do you want to enhance? And what do you want to make it look different than, you know, somebody? I mean, I've seen the same flower literally from 20 different photographers. I did this great shot of a flower and it's beautiful. But I said, you know, I've seen it. I said, you may want to do something with it that's going to make it look different than somebody who shot the exact same image, you know, from 2 centimeters away.
Well, that concludes all our questions from our guests. But I know that I want to throw it out quickly to Deborah and Kevin if they want to have anything to add or ask you as well.
I had a question. I know that because I know a lot of people that in portfolio development ask this question about printing and paper and presenting your works, both for Kevin or Tony, and that is about mounting. prints, the pros and cons of whether you should mount the prints when you're matting and framing.
I think
Well,
that's
I send people, I'll let Kevin answer this as well, but I send people to my framer, all right, who does the mounting. I have a dry mount press if anyone wants it dry mounted. But basically I send it to people that actually they're a wholesaler. They sell frames. They're a really good deal. And she never ever mounts any of them with anything other than museum corners. So museum corners are these little corners that you put on the back board and you slip your photograph into those corners and then you overmat it, right? It's essential. Let's say you're trying to get your stuff into a museum, right? Museums never want to see things mounted. They want to be able to, over time, maybe change the mat. So they want to be able to actually take that photograph out and put it maybe under a different mat or in a different frame and things like that. It's not easy to do when that photo is literally mounted onto the board that it's on there. So it's archival wise, it's much better to use what they call photo corners, and you glue those corners down to the back thing, and then you slip your photograph into the corners. I do all of my, actually make my own corners out of paper, out of archival paper that I have left over from the printing. I make my own little corners out of them, and that's how I mount mine when I put mine up. But yeah, it's not really recommended. I mean, there's some situations where you almost have to. If you're printing on metals and things like that, it has to be mounted on, because the metals are really super thin. It has to be mounted on to something sturdier. So in the cases like that, you have to mount it. But for papers, especially good papers, you really don't want to be putting any glue on the back of it.
right. And if
Did you have anything you want to add to that, Kevin?
yeah, if you frame things, you want to use 100% cotton mat boards if you choose to mat it. You have a reputable framer do it. You don't want to skimp on this. You want a piece of art if you choose to frame it with mat boards. The other thing, and you touched very briefly on this, Tony, and Travis, we've talked about it, Deborah also, is that papers are emotional choices. That's what they are. People come to me all the time and go, what would you recommend? What's your favorite paper? No.
Yeah.
You know, papers either hum to you, they whisper to you, or they sing to you. And you need to find that paper that sings to you. And Tony's got about a half a dozen that sing to him. And that's the way it is. So sample packs, if you're printing yourself, try sample pack. Dive in, look and touch and feel. I've had people come to me and say, well, I don't like glossy. And I'm like, well, maybe you don't like glossy, but maybe your pictures need to be printed on glossy. Or my professor says don't print on glossy, and I want to say, where are you going to school? Look around, you know. Great. And I say go big, go home. 13 by 19, you know, samples. That's the way to do it. You want to look. You want to really enjoy it. So enjoy the passion of photography and the passion of printing.
And I think you're absolutely right. And I think also the image itself is begging for a paper. And, you know, what you want to do is you want to pick a paper that is going to promote what you're trying to convey in this image. So if you're trying to convey, you know, artistic watercolor kind of look, you don't print it on a glossy. It looks like an anachronism. It really does when you do it. You don't print it on a resin coated because it's a plastic. You know, how can you promote it as, you know, a piece of art that's like a watercolor when you're printing it under plastic? All right. So it really depends. I tell clients, because they ask me the exact same thing, what's the best paper to put it on? And I tell them, well, I only stock good papers, right? So all of them are archival. I'm not going to, you know, print it on something that's going to fade, you know, and my inks are archival, my papers archival. I said, you know, but it really comes down to what kind of look do you want your image to portray? And the paper does a tremendous job. You know, some images, they just look incredible on a rough kind of paper. Some images, yeah, if you want to get the maximum amount of black reflected back to you, glossy is the paper, because hey, it's going to reflect more of that deep black and those deep colors back at you than either a luster or a fine art paper. So yeah, you really have to look at your image and say, this is what I'm trying to convey.
Yeah.
And try not to skimp on the output. You spend a fortune on the image capturing, and cameras are so expensive. New camera out, $3,500 for a camera body. You're going to easily spend as much for a couple lenses, and then they go to a warehouse club to do prints, and I'm like, what's wrong with you? You know,
Yeah, yeah. Even the framing costs a fortune.
That's for sure.
You know, I get a lot of people who say, I want to go frameless with the things. I tell them, yeah, we could, you know, I'll send you to the framer. They can do that for you if you want. But you're saving in the one end, and you're really producing something that may not last as long on the other end. So.
Well, guys, I want to thank you so much. I mean, obviously, I think there's part 2 and 3 and 4 in this, and we're going to obviously continue the rock, scissors, paper Hahnemühle speaker series with APA. It's been a wonderful thing. And if you're looking to find out more about what we do at APA, newyork.apanational.com, not .org, I should say, or apanational.org. You can see more about information about APA and the future events that we're going to do. This will also be on our YouTube page. So if you're going to be looking for that, you can look at us on Facebook, where I'm on the New York Facebook APA page, but the national page also has all the events and information as well. I also want to thank all of our sponsors and guest speaker. Deborah, I just quickly tell us about the Develop the Photography newsletter, because it's such a wonderful resource for people, and I want to know people how they can find it and get on it.
Well, anyone who's interested in subscribing, it's free, and you just email developphotonewsletter@gmail.com, and anyone who says, I want the newsletter, gets on
what was the newsletter birthed out of? I mean, it's what
I used to run I still run a program called Portfolio Development, and I was for a long time sent out these motivational emails to the people who were in it, and for a while the program stopped, and people kept telling me they missed my motivational emails, and so I thought, well, I'll start a newsletter. And I started with a very small group of just the people I had in my I don't want to say Rolodex because ancient, but
yeah, that's like ping me, BlackBerry, yeah.
I just started sending it to people that who contacted me, and everyone's sending it to other people, and people keep asking to be in it. It's like a curated list, like a Reader's Digest type of articles about photography, the art of photography, the technical aspects, just the art scene itself, and it's free to anyone who's interested. So just develop photonewsletter@gmail.com, and you can get on the list.
Kevin, I'm going to throw it over to you now, because I'm so excited to be working with you and doing this is going to be an ongoing series with us, and we're already working on the next one. Where people, if they want to follow up with questions, whether on paper or just specific items.
Well, I just put my email address out there, and look, I handle the East Coast, but wherever you are, send me a note, drop me a note, call me. I've already spoken to a couple people in the past on that. I'm happy to help you any way I can. If I can't answer a technical question, I know people who can. So give me a call. I'm based in the New York City metro area. Happy to help. My email's out there. Let me know. Thanks.
Fantastic. Tony, we're bringing it by. We're closing it with you. Thank you so much for that wealth of information. It's a lot to handle, and that's why we recorded it, so we can watch it on the APA paper.
It is a lot.
If people are really kind of looking to form a relationship with the printer, tell us a little about that, how you work in terms of being able to, do you have them come in? Do you have them talk on the phone? Is it a website? I mean, how is your relationship in working with clients?
All of the above. I have a website. It has an order form on it. I never charge anyone until they actually have a print in their hands that they've accepted. it's a little risky, but I've never I've never had anyone rejected. All right, but I believe in the fact that you have to produce a good product. You have to do what they ask for. And if there's anything that I've done wrong, there's no reason why they should suffer for it. So, but I have an upload, so people can upload photos. Basically, most times people upload photos and then I print them. I mail them out to them. In those cases, I tell them, all right, this is it. Do you want to come and take a look at it? And it's the studio. So most often people actually come to the studio to check out their prints before they accept them. And I encourage that. Even with COVID-19, I had clients today, everyone had gloves and masks, right? But, I don't want them to be surprised.
Yeah.
I think it's important that, people are able to see what they're going to be purchasing and take it away from there. So I do that. Rarely do I get people who just want, but I do that also if someone says, yeah, I'll pay for it, just ship it to me. All right, I do that if they can't, get to Montvale, New Jersey. Who wouldn't want to go to Montvale, New Jersey? But
I want to go anywhere right now.
Happy to go any place.
Absolutely.
But yeah, I'll do it anyway. And I was also going to say, I have a PDF version of the presentation. So if your people say, hey, I thought this was really cool, but I didn't understand such and such part, can I see it? Can I do it? I'll, just send them, give them my email address. I'll happily send them out.
We've definitely put your, in the comments, we put your website and
Cool.
What's the easiest way for people to find you?
Yeah, the easiest way, and right there, they could just go to my website and say, hey, I saw your presentation. Can I get a copy of it?
Fantastic.
And more than happy to send it out. It's printing is not as easy as many manufacturers have.
No, I truly think it's one of the master arts. I'll stick to photography, and I'm happy there are people like you out there. Guys, I want to thank you so much, and this kind of concludes our first in our speaker series. Thank you so much, everybody, and stay safe out there. Keep shooting and start printing, because if you're not doing it yet, it feels so much better to have it in your hand and to be able to hand it off to someone. It's magical. It's really, really one of those lost things that we're losing now, and it's such a magical thing to have that, that texture and feel and tactile piece of paper, and to be able to see that print come alive. And I think it really never comes alive until it's printed, and it's such a wonderful thing to see. Guys, thank you so much. Take care.
Thank
Until
you,
the next one.
Thanks for having us.